Welcome to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. I am your host, as always, Jeremy, here to try to make this world seem a little more normal, even though these days that's pretty damn near impossible. My guest this week, well, my guest tonight, I'm very happy to have. She is also a fellow podcaster and a lot more. But we'll talk about all that in a minute. My guest tonight is Savannah Blake. Welcome, Savannah. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Yourself?
Can't complain. Not a bad day. Not a bad day at all.
Well, good.
But so the first question I ask everybody on this show is, what got you into the paranormal spirituality world? Like, what spoke to you? What stoked your interest?
So, I'm prepared. I knew you were going to ask that. I've been paying attention to your other podcast episodes. But I don't think anything actually got me into it. I was just here and from the get-go, as far back as I can remember. I was always drawn towards the magic and fairies and stuff like that. But I also my mother and my grandmother, as well as my uncle and another grandmother. So I guess like I come from people, my family, who were very open about their own paranormal type of experiences. In the household, that is. So I kind of grew up in this double standard of behind closed doors, everybody was very open about it, but to other people, it was very hush hush. Because we grew up in church as well, and you just didn't talk about things like that. But I was a very sensitive child, so I had, growing up around them mentioning things, I just started paying attention and noticed that I was noticing my own things. So much so that the house I grew up in had a lot of activity going on, and I think it was just the location or something. I'm not really sure, because it has lessened as I've moved away, I guess. But at the same time, I was very, very suppressive of all of that. So I would see things and I would tell myself, no, you didn't. You didn't see nothing. Just, keep on keeping on. But you didn't really have this connection between the spiritual and the paranormal. It seemed like two completely different things. So much so that I didn't even know spirituality was even a thing until probably my late teens, early 20s. And that's when I started connecting all of these things. Because believe it or not, I'm actually a huge skeptic. I want to understand what's going on and what I'm experiencing. But the experiences that I had were undeniable. And then the experiences that my mother and my grandmothers would tell me about, and they were very, very serious about it. And so there was no doubt in their hearts either. So that I just kind of took that and wanted to understand. And then I found spirituality and the world of energy work and all of that. And I started putting two and two together. So basically my entire life's work up until this point has been trying to understand all of this.
Very well put. Very well put. And I like that you're a skeptic, though, because the best people in this field are also skeptics, because they're
Absolutely.
not. You don't want someone who's going to see anything they see. They're going to be like, "Oh, it was a ghost." Like, you don't want that.
Yeah.
Like, because then it's disingenuous. It's not real. You're looking for something. Then that you're not just trying to find something. You're actively looking for a reason to say it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's just wrong. That's like a teacher picking out a kid that they can't stand in the class and looking for a reason to blame them for stuff. So it goes along the same method basically.
Yeah,
But
and I want to believe, but at the same time, I am logical enough to know that not every single thing is just automatically ghost.
yeah, there's so much stuff that happened in my life that I could have been like, oh, it's a ghost, but I'm like, no, most likely it's not. Most likely it's the wind. There's a window open, or I bumped into something and knocked over and didn't realize it. Like, it's just the way it goes. Like,
Mhm.
it's not always something supernatural. That's the main message I always try to say is it's not always I wish it was, but 10 to 1, that's not the case.
Well, I mean, everything's supernatural when you really get to the nitty-gritty of it, because the only
Oh,
thing that is that which is.
yeah. I mean, that's pulling at hairs there. But
Well, all I'm saying is that the fact that any of us are here at all, or that anything exists at all, is in of itself supernatural.
I
We can
agree.
call it,
I agree.
yeah.
'Cause I mean, who knows how humans started? I mean, yes, until a few years ago, I was 100% an evolutionist, and I believed everything was evolution. I saw no fault in Darwin's theories about it and the work that's been done since.
Okay.
But now I've been talking to people, and I don't know what I believe anymore. I just can't know what to believe at this point because I've heard so many differing opinions, so many good opinions that have not not science behind them, but they have reason behind them and logic behind them. And I was like, all right, I could consider that a possibility in this world.
Yeah, sure.
But but let's start with what I always like to go to next, and that's your personal experiences because that's what people come to hear.
All right. Pretty generically, when I was a child and in my teenage years, things happened all the time. All the time. Like almost a daily experience. I would see an apparition, or have a ceiling fan would just start turning out of nowhere, or just little things here and there. The biggest things I remember, though, that impacted me is one night I would and I I've been really nervous about this. I've never spoken about my experiences with this kind of stuff to the public before. Um, but there was this one night I was on the computer, and it was right after the internet became a thing, right? So I was on AIM or AOL or something or another, late into the night. And the way the room was set up is that the computer was shoved into the corner, and the door to leave the room was right behind me. And I don't know what time it was, but it was time for bed. And I cut everything off, and I pushed back from the desk, and I turned around and in the seat. And when I did, there was, I hesitate to say the word demon because for obvious reasons. But there was something hanging on the side of the doorway looking at me. And that's the only description word that I can come up with what it looked like. It looked like a what you would call a dark bat-like creature, but definitely humanoid in nature. And when I say bat-like, I'm referring to like the color and texture and just aspects of the face and whatnot. Um, and all I did was turn back around and look at the computer for a second. And I was like, nope, absolutely not. So I just turned everything back on and sat on the internet for another hour, before I turned around and went about my life and day and went to bed and stuff. So that was probably the most impactful experience I ever had. Um, Aside from this other time, my grandmother lived on a hill, and then her nephew lived on the side of the hill, and then my aunt and uncle lived at the bottom of the hill. So we were always like running up and down this hill, and we had heard all these stories about a little boy that lived on the hill, a ghost. And he was theorized because the house at the top of the hill that my grandmother lived in had been in the family for like, gosh, 200 years or something. And probably not that long. It's probably an exaggeration. I'm not sure with time. But anyway, one of my great grandfather's sons or something had died in the house at age like 7 or 8. And they never really knew what had happened. All they knew is they woke up one morning. It had snowed that night. The window to his bedroom was open. There was a scoop of snow from the windowsill, and then he was just dead. So, and this happened in like the early 1900s, if not earlier than that. So we don't really know. But anyway, that was theorized to who the little boy ghost was. But my aunt and uncle's children, the ones that lived at the bottom of the hill, all had the same exact imaginary friend that they talked to, and it was never mentioned to the younger one. They just got of age to start talking, and they had the exact same imaginary friend. Well, we were having a birthday party for one of them one day, and I walked all the way up the hill to my grandmother's house to get like a drink or something. And I walked in the door, and there was the little boy crouched behind her rocking chair. Again, I just turned around and was like, nope. And went and sat on the porch for probably 15 minutes before my cousin came up there and was like, what's going on? And I was like, I told him what had happened. And he was like, don't tell me that. I was like, I know. But my grandmother had seen him as well. But yeah, that's probably my two biggest experiences I've had.
Yeah, I mean, they're both interesting, and I mean, it's more experiences than I've had for sure. So I've yet to even see a ghost. I've had one talk to me, and I've sensed their presence, but I never actually have seen one in a full body apparition, like Ghostbuster style or anything.
I've
That's a
seen a
rare situation.
couple. That was the most impactful one, but there was this very large naked man at my parents' house that would walk through walls. So there was that. And
Naked.
then yeah, I don't know. I mean, he had underwear on.
Oh, okay, okay, well, okay. I was like, I've yet to hear anybody say they've seen a ghost
It was
swing just
naked.
hanging down there, but because I'd be interested almost to hear about what that looked like to see a ghost swing, but
Yeah.
but I mean, yeah, underwear is one thing.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'm almost hesitant to even call them ghosts because that's a word that we have used to try to understand. And I don't know. My whole theory, I've been working with these thoughts and these memories and trying to understand them and how would I place them in our world and whatnot. And energy imprints has been the most two thing that I can come up with. But here recently, I've been learning more about other types of entities and whatnot. So who knows? Honestly, we can sit here and theorize all day long.
Well, we can, and that's also the kind of the point. That's kind of the point of my podcast. But
Yeah, for sure.
but all right, well, let's talk about what you do in this world, because we talked about your experiences, so I want to hear about the energy work you do, because energy work fascinates me because I really don't understand, like, truly what I mean, I've talked to multiple energy workers and they try to explain, but everyone has a different way of explaining what they do. So
Sure.
it's always interesting.
So, okay. And this goes back to why I think they're energy imprints. For the most part, not in all cases, because I do believe that there are entities that we can't perceive that are just as real as you and I, but different from per se a ghost. I think a ghost is maybe a remnants of a spirit and an energy print from someone who was uh, in our physical existence, like the third dimension type of thing. Anyway, backing up. So everything is energy. Your energy, I'm energy, all of that. The way I like to explain it, everybody's seen the Matrix. And
Mm.
when they go into the Matrix, other people that are in the real world are watching it from a computer screen, right? And it looks like it's black with the numbers, the green ones and zeros going in a line. And when these ones and zeros go over the people who are in the Matrix, it kind of like forms them out.
Yeah.
That makes sense? Okay, so our world's kinda like that, only instead of the ones and zeros lime green with the background, it's, more of like threads of light. So, solid white threads of light, and we are energy imprints that are just kind of existing in this, and we can move around and do things in it and whatnot. Um, I work with the chakra system. So the chakra system is they're essentially spiritual type energy organs in our bodies and we have seven main ones that run up and down the length of our spine, even though we have many, many, many more than that. We just, this main 7 are more than enough for anybody to work with, especially in our understanding of the physical realm at the moment. So our chakras connect us to this world of energy, and our senses just, they're limited. They perceive the physical even though nothing's actually physical because atoms don't touch. So everything's just an illusion. But that being said, the chakras interpret this energy and work with this energy because the energy is always flowing, always being exchanged from one person to another. Pretty much everybody's familiar with auras, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, so our auras radiate outside of our bodies, and we can measure this. We have tools that can measure this. Our auras represent the energy that extends outside of our bodies. But when you take away the physicalness of our reality and our perception, the same energy that is our auras is ourselves. It's just what expands outside of what we perceive as solid. So when we're walking around and interacting with people, places, things, and all of that, our auras, our energy is bumping into other people's auras and energy, and it rubs off. And if someone's in a bad mood and they interact with you, or they just walk by you in some cases, then they can, the energy's contagious. So you walk
Yeah.
away in a bad mood. And our chakras pick up on every little thing, and they take the interactions of the world and they interpret it into our body and then reflect it out. So when we come into when we come into contact with negative situations and circumstances, our chakras take that and compute it essentially, and then they're information centers. And from there, if it's negative energy, then we get negative manifestations. But if it's healthy, clean, positive energy, then we get healthy, clean, positive manifestations. And this comes in the form of physical ailments, mental, emotional, quality of life, because our inside reflects our outside and vice versa. It's all the same because the inside is the outside. So I work with the chakra systems. That's what I do. And I help people interpret their blocks and heal them on an individual level so that they can heal their past traumas and their patterns that have kept them stuck in this thing or that, and just kind of help them move. We use that to move towards a healthy just sense of being or existence, as well as hitting certain goals that they want.
Which makes sense, and it's funny because when you talk about, like, how energy wipes off on people depending on what kinda energy it is, it always makes me think of, How I Met Your Mother with the shouting cycle or the shouting circle, how you go from one person to the next and you just, like, everybody shouts at everybody, and that's how, like, energy gets passed on and everybody releases that bad energy. Like,
Yeah.
that's my favorite example of that happening, but I mean, it's important work because I mean, someone having a bad day can lead to something horrible. I mean, it can lead to it can lead to just to go to the worst here, like shootings and that type of stuff
Sure.
or assaults. Like it can lead to it all it takes is that one little thing clicking and then it's just the way it goes. Like but so energy work is important, I believe so. And
Yeah, and
that's
I
what
believe
I
that
mean,
we're coming into a new age, which I mean, people call it the new age, and I didn't understand it for a while because everything that I do is ancient knowledge, essentially. It's stuff that
yeah.
they knew about thousands of years ago. Um, and we could go in forever how we got here. But it's important to the understanding of ourselves and the world that we live in as a whole, because like I said earlier, the only thing that exists is that which exists. We try to section it off between the scientific and the spiritual. Well, it's all the same. What is just is. That universe doesn't differentiate between this or that. There's no boxes. Everything's fluid. Everything's conjoined.
Yeah, which I agree with that. And I mean, even people like Tesla and Einstein agreed with that theory. I
Yeah.
mean, Einstein's famous for saying that spirits exist because when we die, our energy has to go somewhere. It doesn't just disappear.
Right.
So,
Energy's never created nor destroyed. It's just transferred. All the time transferred. And the chakras, which is what I work with, the energy blocks, a lot of people are familiar with these days, is becoming more prominent, which I love, because I definitely felt like the crazy person out here before all of this started becoming more mainstream and understood and all of that. So I'm glad that but yeah, energy blocks, because energy is fluid and it's constantly moving and swirling and transmuting and all of that. And when you come into these negative situations and circumstances, that's when you get a block. And since energy is not meant to be still and what's the word? Congested, essentially. Stagnant.
yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for. Stagnant is when you get negative manifestations in your mind, body, everything.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense. It does, which my co-host is being annoying at the moment, but
I had to bribe mine
so,
to stay out of the room.
yeah, bribes don't work on this one. I have to basically either threaten or to take away things, or I have to put up with it. But so the question, which that all that question, I mean, you yourself developed doing this line of work because you had to heal yourself, I believe, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And in doing it, I've realized that we all have patterns that we just pass on. People call them generational curses because, your great grandparent had a situation or circumstances that led them to believe a certain way and develop a negative pattern, which then they passed on to their offspring, which they then just took as fact and passed on to the next one, so on and so forth until it gets to us. And I realized that in my own healing, that these cycles were occurring and how they're just passed down through generations. So we can't really be mad at the people who gave it to us because they didn't know any better. And thank God we got the internet, because that's what's led to all of the healing that the world is trying to do right now. And through healing ourselves on an individual level, I do believe that puts us towards healing the world as a whole.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, the world needs a lot of healing nowadays. The world's in a very bad place, especially the last, I'd say, 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Which, oh no, go ahead, go ahead,
Oh,
go
I
ahead,
was
please.
just gonna say that, thanks to the internet, I think, because you have to make a mess to clean a mess. And up until this point, we've just been think of it as like, if you're a hoarder and you have stuff stacked up all over the place, to so throughout history, we've just been continuing to bring in this trauma and stacking it up on top of all the other piles of trauma. And now with the internet, we've been able to talk to each other and understand more points of view and more understanding and more learning, because up until the last like 20 years, if you wanted to know something or understand something, you had to go to a library, shuffle through all the books, hope that one of them has the information that you're looking for, read that book. And honestly, I'm finding there are so many conflicting standpoints in books. So even that puts a damper in our understanding of things. It makes it very limited because up until the internet, we only understood the world as much as the people around us understood the world. And when you live in these small communities, it really makes it hard to expand your horizons. But now that we have the internet and we can come together and we can learn easier and understand, we have the world at our fingertips. So we finally started healing because we finally now know that there is a healing, because up until now we didn't even know that healing was a thing that we could do. So now we're trying to essentially clean off all the stacks of trauma out of our house that we've hoarded these some odd thousand of years. And it's messy because healing is messy.
I agree. I mean, and yeah, you're 100% right. If you lived in a small town in, say, rural Iowa before the internet, you believed what the people around you believed, and it's a small town, so they were small-minded, for lack
Yeah.
of a better word. They were small-minded, and I know people who live out in Iowa still, and 'cause I do podcasts with them and whatnot, and they still say like their towns are basically like, well, praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Like that's what they still believe.
Yeah.
Like it's
I'm in
they don't open
Alabama,
up.
so yeah.
I was gonna ask about that at some point because that accent right there is just I knew that had to be a southern accent, but
Oh yeah.
which which I gotta love a good southern accent always, but I always wish I had one when I was a kid. Don't know why, just always wish I did, but
That's so funny because I tried most of my childhood to get rid of mine.
mm, I don't know. There's something about it that's just like endearing. Like a southern accent makes you believe somebody almost because to me it's just you watch all the movies when you're younger of like and the people with the southern accents like the sheriff with the southern accent was always a believable one. But
They're just honest.
exactly, exactly. But so yeah, I mean it's to get these different beliefs out and to get people to heal, you need to expose the dirty garbage of the world, which
Yeah.
the internet did that. The internet did that for the first 10 years full fold.
Mhm. And it's still doing that. It's getting much harder for the people in power to, manipulate and hide and do as they please, whereas before, it was pretty relatively easy.
Oh yeah, one of my favorite things to say is imagine if Nixon was president during the internet era. Like the what could have been exposed then would have been tremendous, and Vietnam probably never would have happened even, but or it would have ended a lot faster than it did. But
And on the
so I
other
mean,
side of extremities, so much is revealed these days that we've become numb to it for a lot of the parts.
yes, which that right there, one of the biggest examples of that in the last couple of years is in the middle of COVID, the government releases, oh yeah, we know about UFOs, they're
Yeah.
real, and nobody paid attention really,
Nobody batted an eyelash.
except for UFO enthusiasts, no one really got excited about it or was like, "What?" Like people were just like, "Okay, what about this new strain of COVID coming out?" Like, which they did that on purpose. They 100% did
Oh,
that on
I think
purpose.
so too.
It was just because they had people distracted already, and they're like, "Well, now's a good time just to throw this out the door
Yep.
and see what happens." But I wonder what the next pandemic will be. They'll say Bigfoot exists, but I 100 believe that's true. But
Oh, I'm definitely, on the side of conspiracy theorist things, but, they've made conspiracy theorists into being the crazy people
mhm.
because, it fits their agenda.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, it's been going on for 50, 60 years at this point. Like
Oh, yeah.
ever ever since ever since the first people that said, "Oh, JFK wasn't shot by one man, he was shot by multiple men," since the moon landing, people saying it's fake and all that, like it's just ever since then, like they try to make every conspiracy theorist look completely nuts.
Yep.
And they that's why they like the internet because it lets these people put all this stuff out there they believe and they let people just think for themselves like, okay, this person's out of their gourd. So
Mhm. And some are pretty out there.
oh, I mean, yeah, I've heard some
It's hard
conspiracy
to
theories. My
sift
favorite
through.
one, my favorite conspiracy theory that I talk about all the time, but other people have never heard of it, and it's like really hard to believe or even prove, but Pizzagate.
Oh, that's a big one. Yeah, I've heard of that one.
It's a big one, but also it's not a big one because people haven't heard of it. Like I only found it because Macaulay Culkin talked about it in his podcast. And that's what I learned about it. And I was like, what now? And I actually started Googling stuff and I was like, okay. I'm like, maybe. I'm like, I
Yeah.
kind of see that existing, maybe. But
Yeah, and you don't want to believe that anybody's capable of such things. Um, and
well,
then
we
you
don't, but we know it's true in this world.
I know, it's terrible. All we can do
Yeah,
is our best here, I guess.
I mean, as you saw with my co-host that was here a minute ago, yeah, I 100% don't want to believe that's true, but I have to be vigilant like a freaking hawk because of having a young daughter. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I have a young
which
daughter as well, so I understand.
And you got a cute puppy, I see. But
Oh yeah. That's Zuko.
what breed is he?
He is half lab, half Great Pyrenees.
Okay, I got a North American Mastiff. So,
Oh, okay, yeah, I like big dogs.
oh yeah, she's 7 months and she just weighed in today at 82 pounds.
Yeah, he's only like a year and a half, 2 years
Uh,
old maybe at
oh,
this point.
when my Mastiff is 1.5 years old, she's gonna be freaking huge.
Yeah,
But she already destroys the house and knocks everything off everything. But when she's older, it's gonna be like, okay, everything's gotta be above my height. But
yeah.
so you mentioned earlier that you think the world's going through a change.
Mhm.
And I talk about this on almost every episode I do because I've heard from multiple people I interviewed that there is a spiritual awakening going on, and I fully believe there is.
Yeah.
But when do you think it started? That's the debate I like to put out there because I've heard multiple people say like 5 years ago, and I've heard multiple people say like 2012.
Okay, no, I think it started with, like, in the '60s with the hippies and the flower children. That's when I think it first started. Because, these things have to be gradual. We're going from huge scientific right or left brain to more spiritual right brain, left whatever, and trying to blend them two both into, the physical nowness. And these things take a lot of time to completely change the world. So that's when I think it started. But yeah, it is definitely which I in the early let's see, World War One, right before World War One, people were starting to get more spiritual and understand all of this, and seances were a big thing. But then, World War One broke out, so people got distracted and kind of like backtracked a little bit. But I think it really started solidifying in the '60s with the flower children and the hippies and the communes, and that is essentially where I believe we are headed. All of their, ideals that they back then were talking about with the living together in community and growing your own food for the most part, and, just coming back to that community-centered way of living. Um, but aside from them, because they never really went away, there's all sorts of people that were in the hippie flower children '60s that are still doing light work, tarot reading, psychic stuff, and they're like, "Oh, I've been doing this for 50 years." But it just hasn't become prominent because, again, we didn't have the availability, the ways to talk to each other. And unless it became prominent in your town, in your area, then it didn't really go anywhere. So that's why you have these like little centralized places in certain areas of the country that are already flourishing with the light work and energy work and crystals and all of these things because they were already doing it. It's just we're more aware of them being here now. And it's becoming more
Yeah,
socially acceptable as well.
yeah, but well, I guess the part of it that people usually say didn't start until like the last 10, 5 years is like the people believing in psychics and mediums and that kind of work more. Because I grew up in the '90s, and when I was a kid, I was taught psychics were ripoffs, they were woo-woo people, and that you don't waste your money on that. They were carnival attractions, basically what I was taught growing up.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I fully believed in that. But once I started talking to them, and I actually would start to experience things happening when I was talking to them, and I'm like, okay, there's something to this. There's something to this. They're not all just out to get money. Yes, those people exist, and I've done episodes that I have released with psychics who actually do like help people define the difference between a good psychic and a bad psychic. But
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They're a dime a dozen, and the ones that are actually gifted and actually know what they're talking about, you have to use discretion with weeding them out because the vast majority of them are just out there to con. And I that's a big statement, but from my own personal experience in energy work and all of this, I'm always looking for people to talk to about it because I live in Alabama, so it's not very prominent here. And I don't get to talk about it a lot with people. So I'm constantly looking for people who know about crystals and energy work and all of that. And I'll start talking to them and I'm like, you don't actually know. Okay. And then I'm moving on. But yeah, I grew up on both sides of it because I live in this area and it's a very it's the Bible Belt, so you know.
Yeah.
um so I had both extremes in my household. Actually, my dad was so no about it all
Yeah.
that he would get angry at Harry Potter, and then but my mom watched Sylvia Brown. Do you know who she is?
I do to some degree. I a little bit before my time, and I never at that age paid attention to stuff like that. But
Oh, I ate it up. I ate it up from the as soon as I could understand what she was doing and what was going on. But I also had one of my grandmothers took me to a psychic one time when I was probably, man, I couldn't have been, I was like 8, 10. I was probably closer to 10, somewhere around in there. But I call her psychic. That's a very generic term. I think she was a palm reader. I'm not
yeah,
sure. She took my hand and she was doing this the whole time and just tracing it and talking to me. And she told me things that I had not told a living soul. So, because she told me, she said, I'm going to start out telling you about yourself, stuff that you already know, so that you'll believe me more when I actually tell you other stuff. And I was like, okay. I didn't say 2 words to this lady before this time. And she was telling me things that I had not breathed a word to a living soul on this planet. So she's probably the one that convinced me that all of this stuff was real.
yeah. I've had some mediums in my show and some psychics in my show who did readings for me, tarot cards, what have you, and they make me. I had one last night. I had a guest on my show last night, and then at the end, after we went off air, she did a tarot card reading, and it's just like, wow, like everything you're saying is I can relate to something in my life, and you don't know me from a hole in the wall, so you can't know this stuff about me already. Like I'm just a
Right.
podcast host to you. Like you don't know me personally at all. So I mean, I
And
found
then
her on
a couple
Podmatch. Like,
a couple of years ago, we went to New Orleans and we were on Bourbon Street, just walking down through there. And there was this lady who had a table set up, and she asked me if I wanted a reading. And I was like, absolutely, I do. And so I sat down and I could hardly understand anything she said, but she wrote it all down. And I was looking at it the next day because honestly, I wasn't in the best mind frame at the time. But I was looking at it the next day and everything was spot on. And she didn't predict anything. She just kind of told me about myself. And this was just a lady I met on the street, and everything she got was spot on.
which I mean, yeah, it's amazing how spot on these things can be, and I don't. I mean, yeah, being on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, I don't think anybody's in the right mind to remember anything. But
Probably not.
that's a bucket list visit for me is New Orleans. But
Oh, I love to go. We go every a couple of years.
well, you live a lot closer than I do, but
Where are you at?
Massachusetts.
Okay, yeah, it's a lot closer. I was like, it's still a 9-hour drive for us, but yeah, it's still a lot closer than where you're at.
I mean, it'd be a 3-hour flight, but I got kids and I got no one to watch them, so I ain't got time for that stuff. But
Yeah.
plus, and I but I was just gonna say something and it completely slipped my mind. But actually, well, no, it didn't because I actually had a someone who does yoga for like spiritual purposes on my show a couple weeks ago. So I'm kind of interested to talk to a second person who does that
Cool.
and talk about how that works. So what what is the well what does yoga do for you and what does it do for people you teach it to? What's the purpose?
Okay, so this is another thing that people kind of have a wrong outlook on. Most people treat yoga like an exercise. And I went to yoga class upon yoga class upon yoga class, and I only ever found one person that didn't teach it like an exercise. Um, but so yoga is it's a personal practice of trying to understand yourself and connect your mind to your body. And from there on, you can like go into spirituality and stuff. But usually I don't get to that level because where we are as a culture and society isn't on that level for the most part. I mean, and again, in some areas they are more open and keen and can jump to the deeper levels of things. But we're so surface area for the most part that most of the time I only get to work with the mind and the body because people understand that more than the spirit stuff. But it's about not only stretching and in that releasing energy blocks, but it's about understanding yourself, your body, your mind, which leads us into meditation. Meditation and yoga go hand in hand. Yoga is meditation in movement, even though I specialize in yin yoga, which is a restorative type of yoga. It's more of a slow paced. Most of my classes are done sitting down or lying down or some combination of both. We might stand and do some of the like warrior poses for like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, just depending on how I'm feeling that day. But for the most part, we just sit and stretch. And it's your basic stretches that you learned in elementary school and PE. Uh, but I direct the mental stuff while you're stretching. So while you're stretching, I'll be cueing you to pay attention to your breathing, pay attention to your senses, check in with how you feel, say some or tell yourself like some gratitude things in your head, find 3 things you're thankful for. And it's another tool. Like the chakra system is a tool, like tarot is a tool. It's another tool for understanding yourself and healing and working through past traumas and finding a better way to move forward. Because on the mat, we cultivate things like patience and gratitude and posture, even, and that we can take off the mat into our daily lives and interact better with the world. And that's really all it's about, is knowing who you are and how you can just be the best you, especially interactions, because interacting with the world that we've created is hard, and we have the mental health to show for it, because mental health's becoming a big thing these days too. And I think that's why meditation and yoga is so important, and so that's what I've dedicated my life to.
Which I respect that. I mean, I myself, as a bigger man and just as a man in general, never thought much of yoga until I started talking to people like you who use it for other purposes than just exercise. Because of
And see,
course that's all I ever thought it was.
the funny thing is that most of my students, and I've been teaching for about 3 years now, most of my students have been men, which I was shocked at when I first started teaching.
Oh,
My
thank
first
you
student
for
ever to get in his yoga, I just kind of looked at him. I was like, "Are you lost?" And he sat down and got everything ready. I said, "Are you here for the yoga class?" He went, "I am." I was like, "Oh, well, okay. Well, welcome." But yeah, most of it's very surprising.
which is a good thing. I mean, everybody should be open to it. Everybody should be open to everything nowadays. I mean, I'm getting I'm supposed to have a past life regression at some point.
Ooh, fun.
It was supposed to be a couple weeks ago, but she had a family emergency and had to
Mm.
move it. So I got to reschedule that still. And I'm getting I guess you could almost call it like an energy work session done this coming week for some dysfunction issues I have. And she was on my show and she told me afterwards she swears she can help. So I'm like, all right, I'm willing to give it a chance. Like I won't say no to anything. Like I'll try anything once, but
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
just don't expect me to freaking go climbing on a tightrope or anything like atop a mountain. I'm good on that, but
Oh, yeah.
heights I'll avoid. Everything else I'm good for. But all right, so you have a podcast. I believe it's called, if I'm not mistaken, Align Heal Vibe, or did I get that messed up?
Align, vibe, flow, which I plan on changing eventually. But at the point in time that I made it, I was just SEO purposes, throw it out there, we'll change it later.
Exactly. Which I mean, well, I mean, I don't think I'll ever change my podcast name because I do love it, but and it's perfect for my show. But what do you talk about in your podcast? Like kind of sell your podcast almost even. Like what do you talk about on it?
I talk about all the things that I've been talking about with you on it. I go into chakras in depth and energy work in depth, and I just did one on the yin and yang symbol. That was fun. Um, the wheel of the year, I talk about that a lot, and astrology, manifesting with the moon, those types of things. So all your fun witchy woo woo stuff.
I love when people describe it as that, even though they know it's not that. It's just, but that's what other people are going to recognize it as. And if you're more open and like to say that's what people are going to say it as, and more people will be like, all right, I'll get a shot then.
Yeah.
But I like astrology. I never used to pay any attention to it. I mean, I would read my daily horoscope in the newspaper and be like, okay, we'll see. Or I'd read a fortune cookie and be like, okay. But I actually had an astrologist on the show, and he gave me a full astrological reading based on my birthday and all that. And like, it was so accurate to everything about me, all my personality, and it was just, oh my god, like my mind was blown. I was like, wow, like
It's fun.
it is, and it's just, I mean, it's not something you can do all the time because it doesn't really change based because you're born one day. Like it doesn't really like change that often, like what it's going to be about.
Well, if you're looking for a personal ID type of reading, then yeah, no, it's pretty much just going to be the same. But once you get past that, the planets and stuff change every day, and you can, if nothing else, and like I said earlier, I'm a skeptic, right? So I went into all of this as a skeptic, and I've always told everybody who are also skeptics, because a lot of people just hear astrology and immediately throw their walls up, and they're like, I don't want to hear nothing about it. And I always tell them, if nothing else, it's an introspective tool. It helps you understand yourself, and you're working with the world, the people around you, your relationships, and it's a lot easier to pull up the calendar and be like, what's going on today? Oh, the moon's square Mercury. Like, oh, well, it's easier to be like, that's why that dude was that's why that was not a nice conversation with him. So you can blame it on the planet instead of blame it on the person or yourself or whatever.
Yeah, which yeah, I mean,
To an extent, I don't condone using that as a crutch. You're still responsible for your own actions. But as far as it comes to like navigating the world on a day-to-day basis and stuff, it helps.
it's like that meme that's out there recently. Like, it's not because it's a full moon. You're just crazy. like, like that's 100% like true. Like, but I know you work with people a lot that have anxiety issues, and
Yes.
my wife has a lot of anxiety issues. She really she doesn't drive. She just has a lot of anxiety issues. She doesn't like walking into supermarkets alone because she feels like everybody's always staring at her, even though they're not. Well, I mean, some people may be, but not everybody is staring at her. So, what do you recommend for people with anxiety? Like, what's some simple things they could do to try to relieve some of those symptoms of it?
Okay, so this is a really big subject. This is I've based everything I do around people with anxiety. So definitely, if you have anxiety, come hang out with me. Um, as a generic overtone, uh, going back to yoga and meditation and how the mind and the body are connected, a lot of the times it's easier to convince the body that you're calm and not anxious than it is the mind. So I'll work with people on, you know, you can't really tell your mind to shut up most of the time and it work, but you can tell your shoulders to go back and down. You can tell yourself to sit up straight and tall. And there's a lot of things that we can do with our bodies like that signal to the nervous system that we're okay and we're fine. And then the kind of back working subconscious will kick in at that point, and our mind will start to follow suit and be like, oh, okay, maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I'm okay. So, posture is a big thing, shoulders back and down, sitting up tall and straight, breathing in the belly instead of the chest. If you look at babies when they're asleep and their little bellies are going up and down when they're breathing, they're breathing the proper way. They're utilizing the diaphragm to really fill the lungs up to full capacity, which pushes down on all the internal organs, which detoxes those and keeps those running smoothly. But as we get older, we encounter stresses in the world because our stress levels, our body doesn't differentiate, our mind and body doesn't differentiate between a tiger trying to chase us and eat us and a paper due tomorrow. It's all the same level of stress.
Yeah.
And we get secondary stress too from other people. So, being on the constant inflow of news, most of which is really scary, we
Mm-hmm.
take on secondary trauma. So that's secondary anxiety. It's all stress levels. But anyway, that causes shallow chest breathing. So we're breathing up here all the time. So trying to find a conscious breathing in the belly, which as adults is sometimes hard to start with because we're so used to breathing in the chest that if we consciously try to bring it down to the belly, it feels like we can't catch our breath because our body isn't used to doing that anymore. So I always warn people that at first it may be hard and at first it may make it worse. But if you just keep consciously trying to get it, it's a relaxation thing. And that's also grounding. So we hear a lot about grounding. And we have meditations upon guided meditations on YouTube and stuff you can find for grounding. But if you can see, we use all of our ways we interact with the world is in our heads. So we think that our consciousness is up here and we keep all of our energy up here. But if we can just drop that energy down to the lower half of our body where there's not as much going on, and that's just breathing in the belly, relaxing the shoulders, relaxing the face and shoulders, just sinking everything down, your awareness into our lower half, that's calming. Let's see, tapping into the senses. And there's lots of different types of anxiety as well. So a huge thing that I do is help people try to figure out what brand they have. Is it trauma based? Is it overthinking based? Is it allergy based? There's allergy based anxiety. And then you have the more specialized sections of like postpartum anxiety. Even a lot of people don't know that that's a thing. So it just depends on the person and their brand of anxiety, but these are things that you pretty much everybody can do. Everybody can ground themselves in the sense of dropping their awareness, breathing in the belly, keeping the posture good, those types of things. Stretching helps.
I mean,
Reframing
yeah,
mindsets.
yeah. What I mean, it is all in the mind. A lot of things are. I mean,
Well,
growing
not
up,
entirely with anxiety.
well, I mean, yeah, not everything's in the mind, but I grew up my whole life as a bigger person, as a fat kid, basically, for lack of a better word, and like I always thought everybody would judge me for everything I do. I didn't like eating in front of. Well, I mean, I did because I had to, but I didn't like eating in front of people. I didn't like. I would hoard snacks in my bedroom because I didn't want people in my house to see me like eating. I didn't want to get yelled at for things like, and like that's the only anxiety I ever really experienced was like that type of anxiety. So I mean, I got over it eventually, and I just said, you know what? I'm fat. I don't give a shit. I'm fat, and nothing's gonna. I'm not. It'll change eventually, but nothing's gonna just make that change by me being worried about it. So
Yeah.
just let it go. I mean, as much as I hate that song, let it go. But
We do
thankfully,
Frozen
my
around here
kids.
too, so.
No, thankfully, my kids never got into it because they're both past the point where Frozen was big. So I got lucky. All right. Well, for the for the last few minutes, since I try to do something local like this for everybody having my show, and since you're from Alabama, what is your theory on Bigfoot, or as you guys call him down there, the skunk ape?
It's interesting because I've been reading The Convoluted Universe. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's by Dolores Cannon, who was a famous hypnotherapist. She did like the past life regression thing. Um, But so I yeah, she I've never really had much of an opinion on it. I was just like, "Oh, that's cool." Um, but in the book, it's been talking about how they do exist and they are humanoid and they are like us, just developed in a different direction than we did. And they stayed more connected to nature and the universe and energy and emotions, and we veered off towards other things. So I was like, "Yeah, that sounds cool. I can go with
Well, no one you ever like knew has seen or possibly like had an experience with one of them.
No. Uh, we have metal cutouts all over the place people
Oh
put out
yeah.
in their
Oh
yard and
yeah.
stuff. So, and I've heard kind of through the grapevine of I live in the Tennessee Valley, so we're surrounded by mountains, and there was not too long ago some accounts that one or some I'm not really sure had been seen in the surrounding mountains. That was pretty cool. But nobody I've ever known personally, no.
Yeah. That's a shame. That's a shame. That's a shame. But I will. I mean, I was kind of hoping 'cause I'm like Alabama's a big Bigfoot state. It really is. Like I've heard so many sightings from Alabama. Like it's because it's a lot of wilderness, so it's a lot of
Yes.
sightings of Bigfoot and dogmen and other creatures. Like it's a lot of sightings of that type of thing. So I was hoping, but I can't. I don't always get lucky like that, and have people that just happen to have a sighting they forgot about.
Yeah.
But so to wrap it up, why don't you tell people where they can find you and where they can inquire you if they're interested in services?
Sure. Earthandwater.co is my website. So earthandwater.co. And you can from there find me across every social media platform mostly. Uh, and then I have a little bubble on the corner of my website where you can just text me directly right there through Facebook Messenger, I believe is what they use.
I
Um,
saw that too.
yeah, I'm real easy to get a hold of. So I'm always happy to answer questions or whatever. And we have a Facebook group where we do things.
Well, I hope that people will reach out to you from this, and I hope that they come looking to you for your services because I know a lot of people in the world have anxiety about a lot of different things, and it'd be great if they can find someone who can actually help them. Because
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people out there that are trying to help with it are just I don't want to say phonies, but kind of.
Well, you can only take someone as deep as you've been yourself, for one.
Exactly.
And for two, most of our professionals have they're biased towards the specific books that they were taught through, which leaves a lot to be desired.
Makes sense actually, because I mean, it's like a teacher. They only can like a college professor will only like recommend like stuff he has learned from the books he learned from. When
Mhm.
they hear something, a new idea, in a new book, they don't want to believe it. Like, so
Yeah,
I
and
get that.
anytime I look up anything, I get uh I have a bookshelf back here on it. It's like you can barely see it, it's kinda dark, but, I have, like, 3 or 4 books I pull out on the subject, and I'll look up the same information across all of them, and then I'll Google it as well and do a little research through there because everything's so conflicting, so it's hard to work through.
I mean, I agree. It's just I've read. I mean, it's the same with me with cryptids. I've read so many different theories and books on them that it's just like I get lost in it sometimes in trying to figure out like what I can believe and like
It's lots of
so
opinions.
it is. I mean, that's the thing about paranormal. It's a lot of we don't know, we're not sure, but here's what we think, and everybody thinks differently. So it's a whole.
Mhm.
I mean, one of the biggest arguments I get all the time in the show with people who are into cryptids is Bigfoot a real physical creature or is it interdimensional and it comes from different dimensions?
Yeah, who knows? It's a good question.
It is, and I've had that argument with multiple people, and some of them just like, "It's interdimensional. You're wrong if you think otherwise." And then some people are there's always the middle people and people that think like, "No, it's a real physical creature. I've seen it. It's a real physical creature.
Or
It
it's
didn't just
both.
disappear." Or possible. But when I say real physical creature, I mean from this earth has been here since the beginning of time, basically.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's why I believe. But I mean, so as all my listeners know, you can find me on Facebook as Paranormal the New Normal / Maniacal Music Musings podcast with the S Facebook group. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as at Juggalo Bastard. You can find us on YouTube as Paranormal the New Normal. All my videos are uploaded there. And you can find us on TikTok as at Juggalo Bastard Podcast. Paranormal shows are not on there yet. Working on it. Working on it. TikTok sucks. We'll say that again. TikTok sucks. I if I didn't get views on it, I wouldn't use it. But I want to thank Savannah for coming on. It's been an amazing show. I've learned a lot, and that's the purpose of the show is for me to learn things as well as just my audience. And I will be back tomorrow for my watchers with another paranormal interview. And for my listeners, I will see you in half a week. Thank you for Savannah for coming on. Please, guys, girls, check out her podcast. Check out our website. The links will be in the show notes. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night, everybody.